If Fusion scares you, then keep watching. I'm gonna walk us step by step through making a subscribe button animation. In this video, we're just making the different parts of the animation, but for the rest of the series, we'll be going over making this amazing animation into a preset, otherwise known as a macro. So for the rest of the videos in this series, we'll do everything with macros in mind. But for today, let's just make a really cool looking graphic. Today, we're making this. I know there's no animation yet, but this is the foundations for an amazing macro. Today we're just focused on making every part of it itself, but in the future, we will be going over making it into an actual macro. We'll be animating it with macros in mind, so that's why it's not animated just yet. But I also have some particles in here that are gonna act as confetti. So what we're doing is we're trying to replicate the subscribe button animation that happens when you actually press subscribe on YouTube. And what happens is this border comes out, it spins around a little bit, and then some particles pop up, and then it all goes away. And then it switches from saying subscribe to subscribed, right? Anyone who's subscribed before has known this, which if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But if we spin this, we can see we have all those colors in here that are going to spin around. And then when we want to switch, we just have to change this foreground background, do a gradual change on this because it gives us cool little like fading effect between the two. We're gonna so to explain the animation, I guess, we're gonna be having this hand, this cursor, come up in this regular cursor form, I guess. And then we're going to be having it hover over this, and then instead of it looking like this, it'll look like it's about to click it. It's gonna look nicer than that. I made that really fast. And then you're gonna click it, it's gonna probably shrink, pop back out, and then everything's going to happen as it is expanding out from that animation. But today we're making all the different parts of this. We're making our mouse, we're making our buttons, we're making our border, we're making the particles, and we're adding it all into this one Fusion comp so that next episode we can animate it in the way that I just described. All right. I think this has been long enough. Let's finally get into making this actually pretty interesting Fusion comp. Like I said at the very beginning, if you're brand new to Fusion, you're going to learn a lot in this video. But if you have used Fusion a bit, you might learn a thing or two. So in a new Fusion comp, let's go and start with the text and the subscribe button. So let's start by dragging in a text plus node from the top left. You can get it from right here in our quick access bar, or we can get it from doing shift space, or you can also do a control space to give you that exact same menu. There's not really a difference, there's just different ways to access it. Or you can get that same stuff from over here on the effects panel in the tools. You can find it under generator. First, we want a button that says subscribe, and we're gonna keep it on the default fonts because I believe they use the Open Sans font anyway, or maybe a Google version of it. But this will work for our needs. It might be needing to be slightly different, maybe needing to be medium instead of bold. I'm gonna get semi-bold just to ease my worries. Let's go ahead and make this. Black. And before we continue, let's go ahead and get our reference. So what we want to do is go over to a browser, and we want to get a reference of pressing the subscribe button so that we can see what it actually looks like when somebody presses subscribe. We won't be taking every element of this and converting it directly into our animation, but we will be taking aspects of this as inspiration for our animation. So on Windows, if you press the start button, Shift and S, it brings up a screenshot menu. And you can do screenshots that are rectangles, so you can draw a rectangle on the screen that makes a screenshot. The full window, the full screen, which if you have two screens, it does both. Or any freeform, so like a masking like this, but however the heck you want. Or we can do video, which does just a rectangle area, so we can just do the entire screen or a small section, and it will just record in whatever resolution you selected when you made that box. So we can make our box. I'm going to make it kind of big so we can make sure we get all the different parts of our animation. We can do that, and it has a little box here. And now we can press our start button up here. We can select if we want to have system audio or if we want to have a mic recording, and it selects all the mics that you have set up. We don't want any of these on, so we'll just mute them and press start. It tells us where our little area is, and it gives us a little countdown. We can just come into here. We can even do our little test for our cursors. So we can have regular cursor template right there, and then a little clicker cursor template right there. And then we can click it, and we can see our animation. We're not going to do every part of this. Like, we're not going to include the bell, and there's a few different parts of the actual sparkle particles that we're not going to include as well. But if you want to, I can show you how, and it's not too difficult. All right, let's start building this. So now we have a little template for our buttons. So if we play this, we can see this is when we're doing our setup. So this is our little template for our mouse. And then this is the template for our clicker. You already heard me say this, but I'm saying it again just for clarity. So the way that these pop up, it's not really confetti, but we're going to do more confetti than we're going to do just like glitter sparkles. Because I feel like showing you the particle system more as a whole may be a little more helpful for you. There may be much better ways to make the confetti. So if you know a great way to do it, let me know. I would love to update this for the next video, by the way. But what we're going to do is, we may not change it to be green, but we do like that sliding animation. And there's not really a border on this. I might actually be wrong about the border thing. You know what? That's fine. We're going to stick with our plan, but if we want to do an animation that replicates this exactly, let me know, and I'll do this in a future series. But I should have looked closer at this before making my little animation. I went off of memory, not off of actual example. That's why you always go off of reference if you want it to look like the actual product. Now, we just want it to look cool, so that doesn't really matter all that much to us. So we just want to replicate the colors. So this first button is going to have white text with a black background. And how you make the backgrounds, you can obviously do like a background node with a rectangle mask and make the rounded edges and all that stuff. But then if you have the text change, for example, it'll get smaller or bigger or whatever. So what we're actually going to end up doing is going over to shading and going over to 4, activating our blue border over here, changing from level from word to text. So it takes up all of the text in the actual text box. Round out those corners some, and let's change our background color to be a bit more of a black. I might change it to be a slightly off black. There's nothing really is ever off black. Off black usually puts people off when they're looking at UI elements. So that's a pretty good black right there. We can then change maybe our horizontal to be a little wider. Yeah. We can then also change our position of it to be a little further down. I think that looks pretty good for our button. We can then just increase our size of our text to make it even bigger. Drag this all the way down here, and let's make a duplicate. But we want to have this duplicate reference back to the this original text. So if we change anything about our second text, it would reference back to the first text, or vice versa. So we can copy this just like normal with a Control-C or right-click and copy. And then we can just do a Control-Shift-V to paste an instance. So let's go ahead and merge those together so we can see them both on the screen at the same time. Go over here to Instance Text 1, and we want to come into here, right-click, and de-instance. Probably don't need to explain this, but it's going to make sure that it allows you to change this, but it won't change the original text. So this still says subscribe. This now says subscribed, but if we change anything like the font right here, it would change that font right here. Come into shading, go to element 1 and right click, de-instance group, and then change the color to black, and then change 4's color to a close to a white. And then I'm actually going to go back and change this to an off black again. Maybe a little bit blacker than it was before. Okay, so now we have 2 different buttons. And we can see we actually messed up somewhere. We didn't de-instance the group here. So what we want to do is just de-instance the color group now. Go back into here, and we just want to reset this to a nice and dark color. Put it around there. Sure. Now if we preview both of these on the screen, we can see that they both look pretty good. They both look like the subscribe buttons. Not the subscribe buttons of old, but the subscribe buttons of now. Which is fine. I miss the little red subscribe buttons. If you do want those as an option, obviously you can change the colors. It's not too hard. So a dissolve node can perfectly go between 2 different images. So what we can do is we can bring background and foreground down. Helps to preview the right thing in the window. We can just reset this to our regular timeline size by just merging everything we've done so far over an empty background, just like how we've done just there. We're putting the background in the yellow input and everything else in the green input that has caused it to merge over the timeline resolution. So now it is the timeline resolution up on the top. All right, now we have these 2 sitting in here. They're centered, they're looking great. We don't really need to be making sure that they're lined up just fine, just because of the way our animation is being set up. We kind of blend between the 2 to where you can't really tell what's the difference between the 2 of them. What we have to do now is add a border to this. So the way that you can add a border to things really quickly is, well, first off, in this, you can quickly just add this, make it an outline, or make it like a bordered outline. Make the thickness really big so that it's visible. Let's turn the blend down. And like we can try to like fiddle around with this to make it work right and stuff. And we can try it and we can kind of get this to work and it can kind of do some things, but it's kind of more annoying than helpful. And it's just like a huge headache because it doesn't know the actual border of what we're wanting to border. Now, obviously, if this is a one-time thing, feel free to do it in there if you want to have the time to fiddle around with it. You can also turn this into a macro, and it's really easy to use. So let's go ahead and add a background node, and we can feed this directly into the background node mask input. This is going to give us a solid, basically a map view of whatever we're plugging into it. So if it has some transparency in there, you'll see the transparency and all that stuff. This is now the color of the border. We can then add a erode dilate node, which kind of does what it sounds like it does. So when you increase the amount, if we preview it on the right screen, mess with this amount here, it's going to increase and decrease the amount. Now all we have to do is merge the original image back over our border and then preview our image. Let's change our background to white. And let's just extend our border and look at that. We have a border. When it comes to this weird curve that we have going on, we can see this weird flat edge that appears whenever we use it. We can change filter to circle and then I'll change it to actually match the edge of our curved edges. And that is the plain and simple of how you can add a border to anything. 3 simple nodes: merge, erode dilate, and a background. Really easy to do. Let's just plug this into our output. Copy these and paste them on over here. And there we go. Pretty easy. But what we're actually going to do is we're not going to paste them. We're just going to do another instance of all of the nodes. So that if we change anything about this first border, the second border changes with it. We're going to hop into here and actually we're not going to de-instance anything this time. Everything that is in here is just as it should be. Let's come into here to background 2 and change this from type to 4 corner. And now this is going to give us a 4 corner gradient that we're able to position however we want. So we're going to choose like some pastelish colors at random kind of, and then we can change the image scaling to be a little bit smaller so it matches our actual background. So if we come into here and unselect auto resolution, we can just bring these down to the exact size of our guy, and now our colors are way stronger. Now the only problem with making it this tight is when we go to actually animate this how we want to, which let's move these up. And let's add transform nodes in here. And we're going to, once again, instance the transform node. And if we do a rotate in here, we got some weird stuff going on. So what's happening here? Well, for one, we aren't rotating the color, we're rotating the entire image, which is not what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a workaround. So if you're not going to rotate your background, don't worry about this. This is really just for this specific, instance. So let's scoot these up a little bit. I also need to put this down here, it looks like. So now between the background and the transform nodes, which we can move these transform nodes down. No, we need to move the transform nodes up with the background, sorry. We can add my special opacity node. If you don't know what the opacity node is, if you watched my very first macro video where I teach you guys how to make your own nodes, then I teach you guys how to make an opacity node. So what we have to do is put the yellow into the output of transform, then plug this back through. This is a mask input, so all we have to do is take our mask from the background and put it into this opacity. Now if we were to copy the opacity, or first we need to then put down opacity in here so that it actually affects. If you were to preview this now, we can see that the inside is invisible. So if you were to get rid of the actual image, we would have a cutout of it. So now we can copy the opacity node and once again instance it right here. And then we also have to press apply mask inverted. All right, now if we were to spin this around, we can see we're almost getting the effect we want, but we're still getting things cutting off. What's going on here? Well, what's happening is we're not quite a big enough size. What we need is to be a big enough size to where we can fit this way and this way. So what we gotta do is we gotta make this a nice vertical, so I'm guessing 90. Come into our background and we just gotta increase or change the height until we're meeting the requirements. So little bit past that point. Now if we spin angle, we see all of our colors dancing around in our little circle. And if we were to preview this one as well, we can see the exact same result happens to us here. Or actually, if there was any color at all. That's what's going on. There we go. Now if we actually plug things into the right places, now things are working correctly. Okay. All that looks just fine. I think the text is done. Go ahead and start tracing out our cursor. So we can very easily use a shape node for this, but we're going to go and jump into using a regular polygon node, just so it's a little bit easier for those who don't know anything about how to use like a spline tool, so that you get a little more introduced to it a little bit easier, because this is just a spline tool. This is just a polygon tool. You can draw similar to the pen in like Photoshop and Illustrator. Similar to, but not quite. So now if we were to put this on up here and give us a background for a color, plug it in like that. And if we were to draw any shape into here and then preview this, we can see it gives us that shape with the color of whatever the rectangle is. Just like how we showed you with the borders here, how the masking turns it into that shape. When you mask into a background like this, it turns it into the shape of the background, or it turns it into the shape of the polygon. Pretty easy, right? So now all we have to do is reset this node and just draw a mouse. So we can easily bring back up a reference. We can maybe even take screenshots and pull them into the software, so we can grab this. Did our hotkeys again. We're going to screenshot, break some laws. And we're just going to drop our screenshot into here, and we're going to make our next one. Let's take in our other one, and we're going to use these as references. So let's go ahead and drag them both into here. Let's make sure that we know which one's which. So this one is our pointer, this one is our clicker. And we want to put this over a background so that these are going to look like they're on the same scaling. So masks are really weird. They really like it when you have the same scaling as whatever you're like tracing. So you don't have a really forked up mask. And it's kind of annoying, but it also kind of makes sense. So you don't accidentally mess things up, but you can also easily mess things up this way too. So I don't know. It's kind of a lose-love situation. What we can do is we can just start then tracing this, and we're going to trace the inside, not our white border. Doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be good. Just want it in the same shape. And I think that looks pretty good now. If we look over here on the screen, this is our final result. It is a nice green cursor. There we go. And now if we were to put this through a background generator like this one, we can, or a border generator like this one, we can then easily make our little white border. Thankfully for us, I have a little simple border plugin. This isn't released or anything because it isn't really Fusion friendly, I would say, for many reasons, but mostly because buttons like this aren't liked in Fusion. I would need to change how the button works, but that's not important. There we go. We have a duplicate of my cursor that I have right here. It's not perfect. Like I said, that doesn't really matter. And we're going to just do the exact same thing. Get another polyline, get another background, keep our background black, put our polyline into there, preview that on one, and let's get traced. This one's a little bit weirder. Hands are a little weird. In fact, curves can be a little weird. What we got to do is do either side of the top of the curve, then we can get a good looking curve going. So if we do either side of our curve like this, and we want to try to make them as straight as possible, so holding down shift makes a straight line, and we can do that all the way down to here as well. And we're going to make sure that we have our curves for down here, so 2 lines there, 2 dots there, 2 dots there, and so on. Down here, we want to dot here, and then we probably want to dot down here. Then we want to dot, I'm going to release shift now, where we want to dot maybe up here, maybe one right here, and I'd say one here, and we can come up here and finish her off. Okay, this is where things can get a little bit more complicated. This mouse was really easy to make because there was a lot of sharp edges that didn't need any forms of curvature. This is all curve, baby. Every single one of these needs a nice curve. If we just select all the parts, do a Shift S to do a smooth, we can see, man, isn't this mouse just beautiful? That looks horrendous. That looks great. I mean, that looks just fantastic. I don't know who wouldn't love that. Okay, let's make this look a little prettier. Let's make this actually our primary focus point for the moment because it's going to need a little bit of TLC. I would say this is pretty good. Let's maybe make these a little bit closer to like the inside of the black. I would say this is maybe a good arch. Maybe make it a little bit taller to avoid getting the weird swings that we're getting with this part of our bar. If we were to undo this and hold down control and then drag this around, we can just control one side of our handle. Let's go ahead and bring this up a little bit, grab this one, bring them up a little bit too, try to make it symmetrical. For these that are swinging out, let's make these as straight as possible because these need to be straight sticks of the fingers. And then we want to just make sure these are all looking good too. And that's pretty much all that we're doing for the rest of the time for the hand. We are just adjusting these until they look good, making sure that we're using control to separate what we're doing to each of the different parts of our line, so our handles. Okay, and after a little bit of TLC, we are left with this monstrosity, which is a little bit closer. If we even fiddle with this a little tiny bit more, which I missed this, you can see it looks pretty much like it should, right? It looks pretty close. All we have to really do is add our border onto this one now, which we probably want to make sure that this is an instance border so that it can be the exact same. We now preview our border. Let's just make both of the borders a little bit bigger so we can fill in the gap. Now, that looks like how it kind of should. May not be exact, like this is a little wonky. That's pretty much it. This is maybe a little bit thicker, but I'd say that looks pretty good for a good little quick trace. Now we have to make sure we can see between the two of them. So if we remember back to our different images here, we are dissolving between the two, right? We're just going between the two, just like that. Well, that's exactly what we want to do here, but on the dot. So what we do is we bring in our dissolve node, connect everything up, and when we preview this, if we were to keyframe this to happen over one single frame, see it instantly jumps into the clicker. So that is how we're going to accomplish that effect. All right, and I think that we are even lined up pretty well. What I might do is come into our hand, bring in a transform node and just make it a tiny bit smaller in place. I think that's gonna look good, and maybe even bringing the pointer part over a little more. I'd say bringing it down a tiny bit. I just wanna line up the 2 points that are actually pointing and clicking on that specific part. So when you switch between the two of them, you can hardly tell something's really changed. If I were to animate this again really quick, just to get our kicks in, we can see it looks pretty smooth because it looks like it's coming from the same place. Sell that reality. And then we can add a transform node at the bottom down here, connect this up with the merge node. Now you have a centered mouse that you're able to move around with a transform node. If we were to preview our merge, our media out. So let's scoot this on down here out of our way. I'm even going to make our borders a little bigger. I might even go with 0.2. So we have the button, we have our border, and we have our mouse. That switches between the two different types. Now all we need to have is particles. So what we're going to do is start over here by just dragging in a P emitter, a P turbulence, or a P direction, and then a P render. These are all of the particle nodes that we're going to actually need in this video. Let's connect all of them up in the direction I have them laid out here. Let's merge this over the rest of our stuff. We can change it to blob, and we can see all these little blobs come flying down. Or we can change it to bitmap, which gives us this little input here, which allows us to actually add a shape for each particle to iterate over. What we can do is we can come and do our little polygon tool, which we've become quite acquainted with, drag it into the emitter itself, and this little mask data turns into the shape data for our particles. Draw a random rough shape that looks like it could be part of confetti. So maybe not that shape, maybe more of a rectangular shape like this, maybe. What we have to do then is plug this into a background, and that gives us both the color and the shape of our little guy, of our little image. If we let it go, it just kind of falls like rain. And we just have to change a few different things in this to make it look like it's coming up and then falling back down. We're gonna have 2 different spouts, one going out to the left and one going out to the right. and then they're both going to fall down after that. So if we were to take out p direction, and if we were to play through this, we'd have particles appearing but not really going anywhere. P direction is what's making them all fall, and then the p emitter just creates them, and then the p render just allows you to see them with everything else. Probably make the drop a little slower, so bring down our strength. Yeah, that's pretty good, but maybe even a little slower. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Maybe a little fast. Okay, that may be a good speed for our little confetti. I'm going to go into here to color controls, go to color variants, and just increase the variance on all of these all the way up. Okay, so I just discovered that if you don't have the background down there, they will actually do what I'm telling it to. So the background was giving it a solid color and it wasn't allowing it to actually change the color of anything. But since we're now giving it mask data, it's now accepting the fact that it can select the colors itself. At least that's my assumption. I actually don't have any idea why it's doing that. But if we were to change any of these colors to be like a, I don't know, like a bluish or like a greenish, we can see we have a big variety of colors going from green to black and white. So green is more like the middle point, because now we have a bunch of color variants of all different kinds. What we can probably do is we increase this out a little bit so that the darker ones are a little bit more transparent to make it feel like you can see through some of the ones falling down, to make it a little more interesting. We're also then going to add some size variants and some different things. I'm also going to center this. All right, so I just made my background white so it can actually take on different colors. And I've also centered it using my mask centered, which, to explain this really quickly, I don't think I did earlier, it has this. This is what you're actually taking the auto crop from. The auto crop then crops it by setting all these values. This crop then takes the X and Y size. Escape center is permanently on so that no matter what sizing it is, it'll always be set to the center of the cropping. You're able to use a transform in between those, and then the very last one takes everything from the first crop, so the one that actually gets the auto cropping. And then this is the one that we can optionally make it keep the center, so that if you end up moving it around the screen inside of the crop, you don't have any like weirdness happening. But it's centered now, so if you were to adjust the size, it's going to actually adjust the size of everything from the center of the images instead of off to the side where I originally drew our little outline. Then what you can do is, if you want to have multiple different types of confetti falling down, make multiple of these, plug them into like copies of these two, and then you can have as many of these as you want. I believe there may be a way to randomize it as well. Maybe something that you have to get back to me on. You may also just have to have multiple emitters, like do this exact same setup and just duplicate it over how many different designs of confetti you want. And you can merge them with a P merge, and then you're able to have multiple confetti cannons. What we want to do is come into number and guesstimate whenever we want the button to be pressed, right? So probably we want the confetti to start falling maybe around here. We want to keyframe, go forward one frame, keyframe, and then go forward a couple of frames, and then keyframe. First keyframe is going to be 0. Second keyframe, I think we're going to keep it 10, and this keyframe we're going to make 0. So what's going to happen is it's only going to generate 10 over maybe a couple of frames. Let's say it only generated 10 once. So let's actually extend out this last keyframe out a bit more so it gradually goes down as it adds more and more over time. We can do it maybe out to there, maybe even a little bit closer. Or we can also do another keyframe one frame before this and set this to be 10. So now it'll be strongly 10 every single frame until this frame, and we just fall. So we can do, instead of it just falling like that, let's come into here, go to region, change this to be a sphere, puts it straight in the middle so that it originates from the very middle here. Let's make this a bit bigger. We're going to controls. We're going to make lifespan 999, but in a future video we're going to make sure lifespan is the size of the comp. That's going to be part of a different video, because that's, we're not in the mindset of macro right now. When we're in the mindset of macro, then we'll talk about macro stuff. But for now, we're just looking at DaVinci Fusion stuff. So a bit of velocity, and let's make velocity a little bit high. Make angle about 90, and that's going to put it straight up. And then it's going to start falling back down. What we want, probably not that much velocity, maybe only about that much. we can make a decent chunk of variance in that. Then we will also want to change angle for this one to be a little more to the left, to where it's like leaning over to the left, and then make our angle variance, I don't know, I'll make it a little high so we can have some confetti going in a bunch of different places. So it doesn't look all like uniform, like it's all coming from the same place. All right, that looks pretty good. If we were to play this though, it does kind of look like confetti, but we don't have enough strength. So let's add some more strength in there real quick. Now let's just add a little bit more to our strength here, so that our confetti is not just flying off into no man's land. Yeah, so if we play it there, we're not quite coming out of the bounds of our button here, which is what I'm looking to do. So let's actually decrease strength a little bit and maybe increase the velocity and increase that angle a tiny bit. Play through this now, we can see it comes out to the side. It doesn't quite look like confetti yet, and we'll fix this in future videos. But we're gonna copy this P emitter, make an instance of it, right click angle, deinst, and we're just going to make this angle the opposite way. So we're going to plug everything together so we can actually see what we're doing. And we're just going to flip the angle to be over to here. And there we go. One more thing, just so we can see difference between them a little easier. Deinstance the group. And let's just make this more of a blue. Now, if we were to play through this, we can see confetti pops out both sides. Looking pretty good. We can maybe randomize some things about them. But besides that, looks pretty good. We can refine that, change that up, all we want. By the next episode of this, I may even have a different way of doing it. This is just how I thought about doing it pretty quickly for the 2 weeks that I did design this on. I didn't work on this nonstop, so don't worry. I didn't make just this nonstop. I was also taking a short little break. So if you did miss me, I'm so sorry that I missed you and that you missed me. If you were really looking forward to a video last week and a stream last week, I am sorry. But I was just suddenly hit with a wave of not wanting to do crap. So I was just like, all right, well, I'll just take the week off. And it was nice. It was relaxing. I was able to just watch shows and stuff. So it was pretty cool. That's going to be it for this week. I'll see you guys in the live stream. And let me know if you have any questions about making macros. And if you have any questions about making this, this project will be in the description as a downloadable file, so you don't have to necessarily follow along. Give me some thoughts about what we can change about this, what we can maybe mend to make it a little bit cooler. Let me know. Also, let me know if you want to see that series where I go over making a super hyper realistic, interactable, like UI element of the subscribe button, like how it actually is versus how maybe you imagined it to be. All right, that's just it for part one, where we just made the outline of everything that's going to be put into this. If you like this series so far, please subscribe. I will be making more in future weeks. I'm also doing a Lua series. If you want to learn Lua and learn scripting for DaVinci, please stay tuned for that for next week. But if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and watch the first episode of this series where I teach you how to make your own macros so you can get caught up. Watch it right here, and I'll see you there.